Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for signing in for the very first meeting of the OWASP Moncton chapter. Julian came to me and decided that this was a good idea to set up a chapter of OWASP in our region, and I agree 100%. This will give us a chance to share information and get to build a little network of other similarly minded people interested in security and secure development in general. So we're hoping that this will grow a bit for us in this region. So our second slide there, Julian. Our first goal here is to make sure that this session, this meeting, and this organization is productive for everyone and we get something out of it. So Julian, you've got control of the screen.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find where that screen is. I've got too many screens here.
You're not working while you're doing this, right?
No, there you go.
There's some background information on OWASP itself, and probably everybody in this call has heard of it, otherwise you wouldn't be getting into this organization we've set up. But the purpose of OWASP is to promote security and software development and security and software in general. And as a security practitioner, I've relied on OWASP guidance in every role I've ever had. It's been very handy, not just for ensuring secure software, but secure software development life cycles as well. And it's because it's open source and it's an open source project and it's published, it's freely available to everyone to download this information or read it online. The piece that has become a bit more difficult that we found lately is the OWASP Learning Academy. Access to that is limited of late because I think they just got overloaded with membership. So we're hoping to communicate some of the information you get to that OWASP Learning Academy through this chapter and provide some information you can take back to work and put to use right away. We're also hoping that this organization that we've set up will allow for a networking of knowledge between people working in the business and the industry and people wanting to learn from them. So we're looking to support OWASP goals overall. So knowledge sharing, providing a forum for geeky people like us, sharing some career information, and growing security in our neck of the woods here. And I'm sure we have some people dialing in from outside the province as well, or who are interested in the organization from outside the province. And that's okay. We're just trying to make sure that the information gets passed around between the members of this group. So our next slide, Julian. So we do have some big plans. And this won't all happen at once. Obviously, we have to have a bit of organic growth in the organization for all this to happen, but we are planning more presentations and webinars, and we're looking also to our membership and those who participate to contribute to that. Julian and I can talk until the cows come home about security and what we see, but it's good to get points of view from all members in the organization. So you don't have to present if you don't feel comfortable. You can just suggest topics to us, and we can arrange a presenter if you like. But if you do want to practice your presentation skills in addition to sharing your knowledge, we encourage that. We're hoping to organize a local conference event. That may take the form of a webinar as we wait for this COVID thing to blow over us. But if we can get past the COVID-y times, then we hope to have an in-person get-together for the conference. And we're looking, as a result of that, to get some sponsors for these types of events. And I should mention now, too, to become an OWASP chapter member, you join OWASP and indicate which chapter you want to join. It's $50 a year to join OWASP, but you get access to more information through that membership, and you get access to their learning resources as well. You get some other benefits. You get to get into their tool set that they have available for members as well. So it's worth the $50 a year to join. And as a member of OWASP, you also contribute back to the chapter itself, because part of those fees come back to the chapter to use for things like events and webinars, getting guest speakers and all that good stuff, which we do hope to do as a result of this effort. So next slide, Julian. We just wanted to cover off a recent cybersecurity event in our area, and it's one that's in the news, so we can discuss it and talk about it briefly. But City of St. John, as you may have heard, underwent a cyber attack, and they're still recovering from it, of course. It sounds like a ransomware-based attack, and it sounds like it was initiated by someone who was part of an organization rather than just an individual. It's quite a comprehensive attack in its scope, and right now it's still being triaged. So I'm certain we'll hear more about it in the news. But for now, City of St. John is recovering from this attack, and you probably heard that they lost their core computerized services. They were all taken down as a result of this incident. So we'll talk a bit about that attack vector using ransomware and what the latest ransomware delivery methodologies are. All of those actually relate to secure development and secure software development lifecycle, because some of those tool sets that are being used now as a delivery mechanism for ransomware, they're tools that you use when you're testing for security in applications and in infrastructure. And they're benign looking tools at first, but they can actually be used to encapsulate delivery of products like ransomware. So we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about some other things like that in future webinars coming up.
That's also a huge topic these days that I've heard a talk about, people releasing open source security products to do some testing, but which are basically being used by attackers. So is that good? Is that bad? What are the ethics of releasing those kinds of tools? There's a huge discussion around that in the security world these days.
Yeah, and sadly, because open source is open source, everyone wants to use it because it's economically priced. But it is also being exploited to deliver within the open source code itself nefarious code, which is then embedded in your network for zero-day attacks or ransomware access points or pivot points within your infrastructure. So we'll talk through that as well, because open source is getting a bit of a bashing again, like it used to get in the old days when it first came out. But there are some mechanisms, tools, and techniques you can use to triage open source risk and reduce it as much as you can. And again, that'll be topics we're going to cover in future presentations and get-togethers. Next slide, Julian. So,
oh, no.
Julian, look at that
guy. Do I present myself? You want to present me? I'll present myself.
You go right ahead.
So I'm Julian. Some of you know me on this call. Some of you know me a bit less. I am and still kind of are a senior security analyst at Mariner Innovations, but I'm moving, and this might be a surprise to some of you, but I'm moving positions very soon in the next few days to become an application security engineer at IntroHive. And co-leader for OWASP. I've got a few certifications, but you'll see I pale in comparison to Tony. You'll see on the next slide. I'm also a volunteer. I volunteer for the Cyber Titan project, which is very cool. If any of you have kids in high school or middle school and you want your schools to be involved in these Cyber Titans competition, they're basically a blue team competition. Very cool thing for young kids to learn the ins and outs of cybersecurity. I've also been involved in planning the new exams for the CEH. And I volunteer at Canadian Ski Patrol. It's pretty funny because what I like to tell people is that I break computers and fix people. So I think it's a good mix.
And Cyber Titans, by the way, was an initiative of CyberNB, and it's still ongoing. I know right now they had some trouble with maintaining it this year because of COVID and the need to not be in the same room with a bunch of people one time. But I don't know where the program stands yet this year. And Julie, maybe you heard more than I did, but
I haven't.
Looking for volunteers, so you can reach out to CyberNB, and if anyone wants contact names, we can get those to you to volunteer and help out.
It's pretty cool. All they need is somebody to go into class and help out kids. You know, they're patching Windows systems and doing stuff like that, and they just need somebody to kind of mentor them around that because the teachers don't really have the expertise.
Yeah, it's a fantastic program. And I have a problem with Julian's Ski Patrol because I used to be International Mountain Bike Patrol patroller, and I had a patrol group here in the Maritime region, the only active one we had. And then the ski patrol took them over. Oh, Julian. So for me, I'm currently VP of IT risk at Butterfield Bank, and that's the Nova Scotia arm of the bank, based in Halifax. I'm in Dieppe, but I work out of the Halifax office remotely. And I have a company, Bot Security Solutions, Inc., which I do some work through as well. Co-leader with Julian on this great idea that he had. And I got a few certs. I put a few up there that I have. And my grandmother used to say, there's nothing like an educated fool. So I poured some money and effort into education, hoping it would pay off. And it does help a lot. I also serve on a Canada Standards Council Committee on IT Security. I serve on IAPP. It's a International Association of Privacy Professionals Certification Committee. And I'm on the ASACA Atlantic Board. So that's me. Next slide, Julian.
So one thing we want to do is allow some of you to, whether you're working with companies that are hiring or that somebody in the group is looking for a new position, we're always happy to open up the floor to have presentations and whatnot. I'll start. This is a pretty funny one because you saw my slide, but Mariner Security Solutions is looking for a senior penetration tester these days. I think you can all know why. So if you know anybody who's interested, we would like somebody, unilingual English is okay. Somebody bilingual will be perfect. We're looking for somebody with a good experience in penetration testing, whether it's infrastructure or web application. And yeah, just reach out anytime. If you know anybody, please let them know. So if anybody wants to present themselves or talk a bit about their skills, or they're looking for anything, just feel free to unmute and go ahead.
I guess I'll go if that's all right with you guys.
Absolutely.
Perfect. My name's Jason. I actually work at Organigram. I think both Julie and Tony are pretty familiar with the team over there. I started off on the help desk side, and then Brian coached me over to the networking and security side. So now I'm kind of more off to helping Joey and Florin with the cybersecurity. But in my spare time, I'm actually I'd like to eventually become a pen tester / red teamer. So I'm nowhere near your guys' skills, but I aspire to be someday. So I'm currently enrolled in the OSEX PWK course. So I like to go after the OSCP, and when I'm not studying for that, I'm usually on TryHackMe trying to just sharpen my skills a little bit. So I got a long way to go, but I'm excited, and I really appreciate what you guys are doing. It goes a long way. So thank you.
Thank you, Jay.
Did you say like familiar with the team or familiar with the products?
Both, maybe.
We've both worked at Organigram doing some threat risk assessment and penetration testing for the team. Tony has been built up their security team from basically almost from the ground up, I would say.
Interesting. So I guess I can go next. My name is Mark. I started hacking when I was in university and kind of always kept it a little, a little close to my heart there. Right now, I'm a VP of game engineering over at, I work out of New York, but obviously with COVID, I'm back in Moncton currently. And part of my job essentially is the development group, the QA group, but I also have the security group under me. I've done my OSCP certification a couple of years ago now, but it's not like it's not something that I do on the day-to-day, but I still love it terribly. I just not a lot of time to kind of participate in some of the cool hackathon and stuff that Julian is doing on a daily basis. So I'm a bit jealous. And same thing. I'm very happy for this to happen. When Julian mentioned it, I thought it was a great idea. So I'm very hopeful to see like where this is going to go, and looking forward to working with you guys.
I like to point out that Mark knows a lot about risk because he's been out climbing twice a week this summer. So up in the cliffs, making sure that everything is secure. There's a lot of parallels between IT security and climbing, I find.
What do you mean? I've been free soloing. That's not what we do. Kidding.
Anyone else feel comfortable introducing themselves?
I guess I will go next. Hi, hello all. This is Prithvi, a master's student in computer science. I'm basically interested in the cybersecurity field, but I can say I'm a complete newbie. So in order to get the hands-on, to get knowledge, I started working on the Try Hack Me and all. So I'm looking forward to interact with you all guys in future too.
Sounds like we have a lot of offensive capabilities in this place. Not a lot of blue teamers.
I'll go next.
Hey, Dietmar.
Hey, Dietmar here. I'm based in Halifax, and I have the pleasure. I've had the pleasure to meet Tony and Julian in person. So nice to see you guys again. I'm a guy who's been working mostly on the defensive side of cybersecurity for the last 15 years. So I'm the guy who I'm trying to understand the mind of the bad guys by putting myself in the bad guy's shoes before I can mitigate most of the problems. So I'm looking forward to learn about this initiative, which I think is great. Happy to be members of it and learn and contribute. And I'm hoping that we're going to have lots of fun.
Okay, I'll go next. My name is Carlo. I'm based in Halifax as well. I'm currently a business analyst for Mariner, and I've been working on a security project for one of their clients. And it's my first time on a security project, and I wanted to learn more about the security space. And, we're talking to Julian a little bit about some of the certifications, and one of the ones that interests me is the Certified Information System Security Professional. So I bought the book and going to start some reading and activity on that front.
Oh, Carlo, that's a long tunnel you're going down, my friend. It'll be good for you. You'll come out the other side.
Oh, aim high, right?
I think that's everybody. I wasn't expecting that much participation. I think that's what's great about having a smaller group, is that we can all work together, and that's what I hope in this presentation also, where we can talk about anecdotes and stuff that you've seen out in the wild and everything else, because just hearing myself talk for a while is kind of boring to me. So that's good. So I think we can proceed. So thank you, Tony. I'll be doing the presentation on the OWASP Top 10. This is just an introduction or a revision or refresher for some of you that are familiar with the Top 10. But we'll go through them, talk a little bit about each one. This is going to be part one. I didn't want to cover all 10s at once because it's just too long, and it's just going to be way too much rambling. So I'll be honest, I'm not an expert in most of these, but I've seen them in a while. I've done about, I would say, 70-ish pen tests in the last 3 years. So the OWASP Top 10 is basically it's a set of standard awareness guidance. It's not a set of controls. It's more a consensus of what the top or the most critical security risks are in web application these days. The current version of the OWASP Top 10 is from 2017. I have a feeling some of the items are going to change. They're compiling the list for 2020 right now. They try to refresh it every 2 to 3 years. So some of the stuff that was really prevalent in 2017 might not be as prevalent today because, in part, because of this initiative where there's more awareness into these security risks and people are starting to be smarter about them. You can see the link here on the page, and my goal is really to have you guys understand that this exists, understand a high-level overview of what the top 10 security risks are as per OWASP, and then you can go off on your own and do your own research and see the ones that interest you the most, and maybe even try to exploit them. It would be awesome to do a webinar or a workshop at some point where we could actually demo some of these security risks being exploited. It would be pretty cool to see. So I'll just start off. I guess one of my questions is what keeps you up at night? Well, first of all, I have a dog, 2 cats. I have 2 kids. Apparently I snore and my wife kicks me and wakes me up in the middle of the night. But really what keeps me up at night is security breaches. Stuff like you've seen happen in St. John. Stuff that I put my name on, I give a report to the client, I vouch that their system is secure, and then the next day it gets breached. So, and I have a feeling anybody who works in IT security feels the same way. So the OWASP Top 10 is a way to understand what those security risks are and at least have a good understanding of them. If you're not aware of them, maybe this presentation will keep you up at night even more, but at least the first step is understanding, right? So without further ado, here are our stars of the show. Like I said, we're going to cover the first 5 in this presentation, and we'll cover the last 5 in one in a few weeks from now. So number 1 on our list are injection. First thing that comes to mind for me when I hear injection is SQL injection, but it's more than that. You can have LDAP injection, you can have code injection, you can even upload Python files or Perl scripts that will actually run on the system. The idea is to relay code to the backend system and get it to run, and whether extract information, delete information, just do whatever you want on that system because you were able to run code on it. Basically, the world's the limit, and you can be pretty creative. These used to be very, very prevalent, and I'm sure that they are in legacy websites out on the internet. Unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, as a white hat hacker, I can't go out and just scan all systems and pick a website for a mom and pop shop and try to exploit it, right? The thing that I see as a consultant is that if the company is mature enough to hire a security consultant to go in and look at their systems, most of the time they'll have the low-hanging fruit resolved. And an SQL injection, if you've been in the industry for a while, you understand that it's used to be very prevalent. So you don't see it as much in the wild anymore. I exploit it all the time in Capture the Flags or Try Hack Me or Hack the Box. They're always over there. But in the real world, I see it a bit less. So what we'll do for each of these is we'll just look at, this is what you're seeing on the screen right now is what's on the OWASP website. I won't read from the screen. I'll just talk about these ones a little bit. And we'll also look at how to prevent these things. And then invite you to go to the website later on your own and read about this stuff in depth. So how do you fix SQL injection? Input validation. Anywhere where there's user input, you want to make sure that you look at that code and you don't allow dangerous things to be put into those fields. Quite simply. Using an API is probably the best way to do things.
Yeah, we ran into this API issue more than, I guess, on a few occasions where someone's using an unsafe API methodology. There is a safe way to use APIs and there's an unsafe way to use them. In my experience in lottery and gaming, back in the day, we were always looking for API usage that was not secure between devices that needed it to be secure. And we saw this as well, Julie, I know a few dozen times with some reviews we did of solutions for clients of mariners. We could see improper or unsafe use of APIs as a real risk.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to point out that OWASP also releases a top 10 API security risks, which might be worth having a look at. APIs are more and more prevalent these days.
Yeah,
but injection, especially SQL injection, I rarely see it in the wild anymore. I think I've seen it once or twice, but it's not as prevalent as it used to be. So moving on, number 2, broken authentication. This is all about username and passwords. Default admin credentials, I see that all the time, whether it's on something as simple as a printer or a UPS device. You can imagine if I can log into a UPS device, I can shut down the whole system. And this is basically what CRA had, the issue that they had this summer, where people reuse passwords all the time. So you don't have to even, you don't even have to breach the CRA website to be able to actually use credentials on it, because people reuse credentials. They use the LinkedIn breach, they use the whichever else breach you can think about, and they just use that same username and password combination and try to log in. There are ways to protect against that. We'll see it. It's mostly around just rate limiting, not allowing somebody to just throw random passwords all the time. After 5 tries, you lock them out, and all kinds of stuff like that. We're looking here also as unexpired session tokens. That's fairly common. The best way to breach or to exploit this is to, whether you have a cross-site scripting attack or anything like that, and you can steal the tokens and then reuse those tokens. I'm just reading through here, and how do we prevent this? No default credentials, obviously. So if you ship a software or you ship an application, you should always prompt the user to insert that first password. So whenever you have an administrator logging in the first time, you ask them to set the password instead of you setting it by default. Multi-factor authentication is very important, though this is something I think we'll see in the next top 10, is that we're starting to see attacks against multi-factor authentication, especially on the SMS side, SIM swapping and other attack vectors. I use a YubiKey. It's awesome. There's not a whole lot you can do to try to hack that. So yeah, broken authentication is all around username and passwords, and I see this all the time.
Another answer to this in modern infrastructure design anyway are zero trust networks. They say that's the next way to go in your infrastructure to prevent broken authentication, which is fine and dandy, unless you're building an application which has authentication requirements and you're selling that or deploying that somewhere where they haven't got zero trust, or you can't integrate it to a zero trust network. So there's these other measures like MFA, I think will still be around for a little bit. And then, as Julie mentioned, there's augmentations to that MFA type of methodology today too. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, that's what the Twitter hack was all about, right? It was not the latest one where they actually stole credentials inside of Twitter, but Jack Dorsey's account, the CEO of Twitter, was he was attacked by a SIM swapping. Somebody pretended to be him, grabbed the SIM, and then they have his phone number. And I mean, once you have the phone number, you can intercept their SMS codes. We'll talk a bit more later on about broken access control, but the other thing that I've seen a lot out in the wild is single sign-on. Single sign-on is great, but there are some drawbacks, some by design that I personally don't like. And but there are ways to inform clients what the problem is, but we'll talk about that in a little bit when we run into broken access control. Sensitive data exposure. Here it's all about cryptography. It's too bad. I had somebody that could have talked at length about something that they ran into. It wasn't a breach, but it was a vulnerability that they had, where it was an IoT device that had the cryptography method that they were using on it suddenly became not accepted anymore, and they had tens of thousands of devices out in the field that they had a really hard time patching. So it's very, very important to use the latest and greatest in cryptography. It's so cheap these days to have computing power that there's no reason not to use AES, up to 512, up to like as high as you can. So this is something that I see a lot in the wild, and it's mostly around stuff in transit. Either people don't encrypt inside of a data center. Insider threats are a real thing. So I always recommend people to encrypt even inside the data center. And a lot of companies still are pulling out TLS 1.0, 1.1, which is deprecated these days. There are some cryptographic flaws around it. It's easy to test for, extremely easy to test for. There's a bunch of tools online to test for weak cryptography on your website. And it can be a bit hard to exploit, but why take a chance? It's so easy to fix. Data at rest, it's a bit harder to find weaknesses at data at rest, but at the same time, a lot of breaches that we've seen is just stuff not being encrypted in database. Once you have your SQL injection and you start looking at that database, if stuff is not encrypted, then it's a free-for-all. If it's encrypted, then you'll have a much harder time, especially around passwords. Hard drive encryption on your laptops. Everybody has a laptop these days. There's no reason not to encrypt your hard drive. If your laptop gets stolen, people can't just pull out the hard drive and start looking at data on it. So this is something that is very, very important, and I believe it's going to stay with us for a long time because cryptography is hard to get right. Now, how to prevent? My favorite one here is just don't store sensitive data. If you don't need it, don't store it. I mean, it can't be stolen if you don't have it. So if you want to do credit card processing, just tokenize it and defer the whole credit card storing to a third-party provider. Mind you, you need to be trusting of that third-party provider. Another part here is just classify the data. Once you know the classification of your data, you know how well it needs to be protected. If it's public information, then you don't have to protect it as much. Use industry standard encryption. Again, don't roll out your own crypto, please. That's the worst. And NIST, Tony, I'm not sure if you know the publication number, but NIST puts out a publication number around what are the cryptography standards that are accepted these days.
Yeah, I can't remember that number, but I was talking to a blockchain industry, I hate to use the word expert for anybody these days because everyone uses it, but I said this guy was knowledgeable for sure on blockchain a few weeks ago. He's based out of Seattle, and he was talking about using blockchain as a method for protecting data, because then you don't just get a way of sort of encryption, if you understand blockchain. It's actually beyond that. It's also authenticated data that you know the source of and you can verify the content of, so you can verify its integrity through signing and other mechanisms within the blockchain realm. And then blockchain gives you an immutable source for the data. So if you try to interrupt its retrieval or storage mechanism or its transmission mechanism, you actually break the chain, you break the data, so it becomes useless. It's a neat way to think about protecting data, and it is evolving, and there's whole groups of people working on this science of applying blockchain to data protection.
Now, the other part of this coin is that there's a really strong nation states and companies that are always working towards breaking encryption, and that's the scary part too. This is why whenever somebody talks about storing data in the US, that's a big no-no in my part. If you're only doing business in Canada and you have either some health information or financial information for Canadians, first of all, as per PIPEDA, you're not even supposed to store it. But a lot of people say, well, if it's encrypted, then it's okay. But yeah, the US is always working towards trying to break encryption. So just because and I think it's Dietmar that made this point just a few weeks ago, just because it's safe today doesn't mean that tomorrow that cryptography, that encryption mechanism is not going to be broken.
Yeah, and that's the topic of federated data. And data federation is really, it's a risk outside of any nation state today, whether it's the EU realm, North America, US, Canada. So it's not unique to any one country. But the risk is really around the penalties you pay if that data happens to get breached. The penalties you pay, for example, in the form of fines to the EU through GDPR can be quite substantial because they charge per record that's breached. In the US and Canada, you can end up with lawsuits as your penalty. You'll get some fines through PIPEDA, through federal law within Canada. They have the right now to levy fines if you haven't properly protected data that's PII or PHI. However, your bigger risk, I think now, even within Canada, can be class action lawsuits if you have a breach that's improperly proven to be the result of improper handling of data. So yeah, protecting the sensitive data is really important.
I always, anytime I talk about this topic, I always think, I wonder what it would be like to go in the past, let's say the past 10 years ago, and look at some of the major breaches that happened and put a dollar figure on them. It would be interesting exercise to do.
Yeah, you even look at Equifax and the breach they went through. It destroyed their entire top level to their information security team. They were wiped out from the top down, and they replaced them. I actually did an audit of Equifax before that breach and could see some of the miscommunications they had between their separate security teams. And I pointed that out at the time. And I said, you've got a huge risk with that lack of communication between these various teams that have different responsibilities, but they all relate to security, from development up to even business continuity. They're all separate groups that didn't talk to each other. So the opportunity for a breach there was enormous. And then they got breached, but they're still paying the price for that.
Absolutely. That whole industry is. This is one that the XML external entities is basically an injection attack. I won't spend too much time on this, but it's really a server side. Some of the XML processors. Now, when we're talking XML, we're also talking about, there's a lot of file formats that use XML that you might not realize. Something like any modern Microsoft Office document, whether it's docx or XML, XLSX, those are all XML, and they are vulnerable to this security risk. Some image formats such as SVG, I believe, is an XML kind of file document. So this used to be pretty prevalent. I've played around with this quite a bit. It can be hard to detect, and it can be even harder to exploit. But basically, you can inject code inside of an XML file, and the XML processor, if it allows what we call DTD, I forget what it stands for exactly, but basically it'll actually run the code and you can interact with the OS. So if you're on Linux, you can look at the password file, you can look at the shadow file if you have root. You can potentially run commands and do stuff like that. Again, this is something that was very prevalent a few years ago, but now it was such a huge problem that there aren't that many XML processors out there. So libraries that actually process XML, whether it's in Python or ASP or Ruby or whatnot. So most of those processors have been patched. So this is more of a legacy issue. And I kind of touched on this in the past, just earlier on the slide. But like I said, what I see out in the wild are companies that are ready to put money in somebody to go in and consult with them on their security side. So they have a mature program, which means that most of this stuff is already patched when we go in. I've exploited this many times on capture the flags stuff. So how to prevent it, developer training. You can use less complex data formats such as JSON. JSON has its own problem. You will look at serialization on part 2 of this. Mark, do you want to?
Yeah, I do have an issue that happened with JSON for us. We have a product that was a C++ product, and we never had issues with parsing the JSON response. But then we went to a encrypted version of that for the web. So essentially, we transpiled the C++ code to through Emscripten so they could run on web, and we essentially have the same product now on the web. But while doing so, we eventually caught a problem with the username, which was returned as a JSON response, could essentially be escaped. And we didn't notice until we hit the web. Like, it never was an issue in C++, so on the C++ side, so we never caught that. But on the web, obviously escaping the JSON and essentially opening ourselves to attack, because it was run within the client at that point. So yeah, we've ran into this this year, actually, the JSON.
Nice. So when you escaped the JSON, you were able to run commands, or you were able to change the JSON object so that you could log in as somebody else?
Yeah, like capture tokens or whatever is
Nice.
in the session. Yeah.
Nice. See, real world. Good thing you caught this. Absolutely. So yeah, last one that we're going to look at, and again, as I'm talking about this, I hope that some scenarios come to mind, so we're going to have a discussion or questions afterwards. So it'd be pretty interesting to see. Now, this is my favorite, broken access control. So much fun. I see this all the time. I mean, you log. I'll give you a scenario. You log into a system with your username and password. It accepts the username and password. Then you start looking at the HTML parameters, whether it's a URL parameter or something in the HTTP request. And you notice that there are some IDs. So I'm looking at message ID number 1000. As soon as I see this, I think, hey, what can happen if I change that to message ID 1002? And then all of a sudden, I'm reading somebody else's message. Or I go to change my profile and I see ID 5000 and I change the ID to 5001. All of a sudden, I'm seeing all the information for another user's profile. This is so common, it's almost painful. I'm in the process right now of thinking that we might have a 0-day bug in a system that is kind of critical infrastructure and it's deployed everywhere in the world. And basically I was able to change the HTML parameters and do certain things. I'm under an NDA, so we can't talk too much about it. Dietmar knows exactly what I'm talking about, but just completely breaking the access control. This is something common in capture the flags. You see this all the time. Some of the issues around this is mostly that the developer thinks that by limiting what you can do on the UI, the functions that you can do in the UI, such as administrative functions, changing certain things on the website, if it's not presented in the UI, then the user is never going to be able to do it. But in reality, if you actually change the HTTP parameters or you do certain calls, certain API calls manually, you'll be able to actually do those changes because there's no server-side controls or there's no server-side checks to see whether that user can do this or not. This is something in web applications that I see all the time. So how do you prevent it? It's got to be server-side. Anything client-side can be bypassed very easily. And it needs to be done on server side. Just make sure that the user is allowed to do those functions, and anything in the database should be associated to a user. So when I try to delete something in a database, it should say, is this user allowed to do this, whether through a session ID or I'm not a developer, so but you can imagine, right? We need to make sure that the records can only be tampered with by a certain user or an admin if the admin can do it. So yeah, like I said, this is my favorite. This is so much fun. All right, so that's the first of the 5 top 10s. We can just look at the other ones. We're looking at security misconfigurations, cross-site scripting, insecure deserialization that we're seeing more and more. That's extremely complicated to exploit. Components with known vulnerabilities and insufficient login and monitoring. There's a lot of cross-reference between these ones. Components with known vulnerabilities, of course, if there's known vulnerabilities, then XML, external entities, those are kind of related, right? So yeah, those are the first 5.
Excellent, Julian. That's a great start. And we do plan to also have some information sessions on things like some tool sets that we enjoy using for practicing our skills. And that includes some hacking resources you can get online where you can go and play without getting in trouble with the FBI or CSIS or somebody.
Yeah, we can demo some of these too. Like, it would be great to demo some of these.
Yeah, we will share some of those things. And we'll also talk through secure development practices as well, and how you can build that sort of a thing within your organization or work within a secure development lifecycle. And we'll talk about some infrastructure risks as well, since anything you build in the code world, you also have to worry about where it's being parked and how you can best secure that environment.
That would definitely be interesting. When I started where I am, I mean, we have a casino product, and since we're a development shop, we have a lot of development tools. One of the tools being Jenkins, and initially, when I joined, I wanted to have access to some of the build agent because there were some issues, and I was told that because of security and audit, I can't have access to it. Then I found a Jenkins with a anonymous login that had a script console. So go in a console, and I could basically, I came back the day after, I had access to all the machine. So it's definitely something that I think any development corporation, like they try to make stuff easy, sometimes a bit too easy, and security goes to the wayside. So definitely something to look at.
One of the things that I've heard at one point, it's a great analogy, and like anything else, analogies eventually break down, but the best I've heard was security is all about putting brakes on a car. And I thought, wait, that's not a good way to say it, right? You don't want to put brakes. You want to make sure that things are still efficient. But what do brakes do in a car? It allows you to go fast, because as soon as there's a problem, you can jam that brake and stop. So the idea about security is that, listen, we'll put all of these things in place so that you can go really, really fast. And when there's an issue, then we will see it right away, stop everything, fix it, and then you can keep going and accelerate again really fast. That was a pretty cool analogy.
Yeah, I do like that. I mean, you put on the wheels to go after you have the brakes on. So, you know, that's just to show like that, you know, security should be really shifted left into the development cycle, where it's often way to the right, where at the end of the cycle, which is a problem right now.
Yeah, we with clients, a lot of the times they'll pull us in 2 weeks before going live. They've been working on the product for 6 months, and then they pull us in to do a security assessment on the product 2 weeks before going live. I'll give you one guess as to what happens. They don't go live after in 2 weeks once we go in, because we find things and it takes a long time to fix once it's in place. You really want to grab those things as early as possible so that you're not making those mistakes. But the more that we work with clients and the more that we show them, you see a clear progression in their security thinking, where at first you find a whole bunch of stuff, and then once you've worked with them on a few projects, all of a sudden you're not finding as many things. So it really adds value to have somebody look on the security side of things. I mean, it's a lot cheaper than being breached. It's a lot cheaper than being a headline in the news like St. John is doing now. I mean, I'm not familiar with them enough to know what their security program looked like, but I hope it wasn't negligence or anything like that.
you find that's a common thing, Julian? Like, I don't say last minute, but is it just like they're assuming that everything's going to be fine and they're just doing their what they think is due diligence and call you guys in and they're just naive to what can happen, or is it just does it happen more often than not? I should ask.
I would say that like anything else, it depends. It depends on the maturity of the client. Once they've gone through the exercise once or twice, if they're going to do it again, then they've learned their lesson. But yeah, a lot of times they'll pull us in as consultants, as third parties. Sometimes you see that it's really just to check boxes. They don't want you to find anything. They would rather you say, there's nothing there, but you can't do that, right?
So, Jillian, you and I had a really cool experience with a major client, a very large client, where we were helping them out with testing some product they were using to run the retail business. And in that case, they were certain they did everything right up until that point because they had another third-party company helping them build it, who assured them of their security posture. So sometimes it can also be that, because in that case, we found a lot of issues. It can be that they've been sold a bill of goods by someone else and they think everything is great until they get another set of eyes on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did anyone have any questions or anything else you wanted to share on tonight's call?
Yeah, I kind of like to just poke you guys about the future like resources you said that we'd be practicing with and in like a sandbox environment. Is it going to be specified to the like this top 10 here? Because I know that's something I'd really like to sharpen up on. Or is
Yeah,
it just going to be
absolutely.
kind of like a? Oh, sorry, Julian.
No, I say absolutely. We can cater it to anything really. I mean, these vulnerabilities that we've looked at today, these first 5, and then the last 5 that we're going to see there. Anytime that you have a capture the flags or anything like that, some of this stuff is in there. There are some that are very gamified where you need to break cryptography and all kinds of stuff like that and find flags and find hidden files or stuff like that. But the ones that I really like to do for workshops and whatnot is really looking at broken authentication, broken access control. Those are all, since they're pretty common, then yeah, we can showcase those pretty easily and show what tools and everything else. And I'm not the only one on this call that can do this. Also, I'm Mark can show some of that stuff too. So yeah, we any suggestion that you have, Jay, just let us know. And you can reach out if you go on the OWASP Moncton website. My email is there, and if ever you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to reach out. I always love to talk shop.
We could do maybe a WebGoat. I'm assuming that's still a product. WebGoat hack.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything on VulnHub, even Metasploitable 3 is still available. Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be more value and more fun than just hearing me talk, because I got bored of hearing myself talk.
Don't cut yourself short, Julian. You're doing fine, man. But yeah, we'll plan a live fire night and take some time and try like a single vein exploit. We'll take one of these topic areas and run through it.
Oh,
one of the things that I really love to do, one of the products that I love, it's a company called Security Innovations. They have a cyber range called Command and Control. It's all web apps, and there's so much fun. I get, like, my wife just leaves because she knows I'll be gone for a couple of days whenever they spin one up, because I get obsessed with it. And they highlight all of these things here, and they're so much fun. It's a little bit of a friendly competition.
Those are the guys who had that hot dog picnic event or whatever, right?
That's the one, yeah, exactly. And they do allow private events. I did one that was through OWASP Toronto. And if we have sponsorships or anything like that, then we could maybe something that we could gather as a group. It would be fun to be in a lab somewhere, maybe at the Venn data center, at the Venn garage or something like that, and all sit down with our laptops and go through it. But we'll see what happens with COVID.
Is that kind of more CTF oriented, or is it like a King of the Hill type thing, or is it just something completely different?
It's mostly CTF, but with legit stuff. Like if you can do a broken access control, they'll give you 50 points. If you do broken authentication, they'll give you 150 points, depending on how hard it is. And there's dozens and dozens and dozens of stuff that you need to look at. They all range in different difficulties. They're a lot of fun. Reach out to me, Jay, and I'll show you. They have a free one that you can spin up whenever you have free time. I think you have access for like 72 hours. And just reach out and
hey Julie, we want to send that link around to everyone on. Well, actually, you can send it through LinkedIn. Even you could share it out.
Yeah,
and everybody on there could find it. And if you're looking for us, if you haven't found us yet, we are on LinkedIn, and both Julian and I are also individually on LinkedIn. And my profile is under the name Tony English, not Anthony English, but you can find us on there too and link up.
All right, well, I think we're right on time. So yeah, this is to be continued. We'll look at the next 5, and now you know what to expect from our meetings. It's going to be a range of different things, and I think we're going to do great things here in Moncton. And anybody who's joining us from outside, if ever we do meet up in person, we can also always do a live stream where you could join us on a live stream and have somebody monitor it if you have any questions or anything like that. So just because you're not in Moncton doesn't mean that you can't keep following us and working with us. And again, if you have any suggestions for future talks or anything like that, we're open. If you want to be involved in the chapter, we're more than welcome to have any help. So just reach out and let us know.
Yeah, and I do encourage you spend your $50 on an OWASP membership if you can afford it. It's well worth it, and it gives you something else in your resume as well. You're part of an organization that's recognized internationally.
So just before leaving, I'd like to review that question that I said earlier. What keeps you up at night? I hope learning all about these security risks in your web applications will not keep you up more. And learning from them, I hope, will just help you sleep better, because now you know how to fix them.
Thank you very much, guys.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, thanks, Julian. Thanks, everyone.
Mark, we should go for coffee soon.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Everyone.
definitely.
We'll send out another meeting invite shortly.
All right, thank you very much, guys.
Thanks,
Talk
guys.
to you later.
Bye, everyone.